Hello, everyone. Oh, what a great crowd. Welcome to the Billy Wilder Theater. My name is Shannon Sonova, and I am the manager of public programs here at the Hammer Museum. I hope you all know that I'm not exaggerating when I say it's a great honor to support the production of conversations like this one about to happen on stage. With the uncertainty surrounding the future of arts funding in this country, it's really heartening to be in community with artists and thinkers committed to the promise of art and ideas to illuminate our lives and build a more just world. We're also deeply grateful for the support for this program from the Getty through the Paper Project Initiative. Tonight's panel is moderated by Naoko Takahatake, the director and chief curator of the UCLA Grunwald Center for the Graphic Arts, which is housed here in the Hammer. Prior to her time here, Naoko oversaw and expanded the Getty Research Institute's extensive holdings of works on paper from the 15th to the 21st centuries and contributed to the organization of many outstanding exhibitions. She also served as the curator of prints and drawings at LACMA, leading the charge for a vast reorganization of their prints and drawings collection. There's very little printmaking scholarship that her work has not touched, and we're thrilled to have her here at the Hammer overseeing the Grunwald. The Grunwald Center for the Graphic Arts was established in 1956 and has grown over the years and now holds more than 45,000 prints, drawings, and photographs from the Renaissance to the present. The Hammer has a gallery dedicated to works on paper, which frequently exhibits works from the Grunwald collection, as well as a study center where students, scholars, or other members of the public can make appointments to view works from the vast and varied collection. We just opened an incredible exhibition titled Performance on Paper, curated by Naoko, which investigates how works of art on paper can store sound and movement, becoming lasting visual records of ephemeral sonic and dance experiences. I encourage everyone to come back and spend some time in the galleries. So tonight's conversation explores the place of printmaking in Los Angeles through Analia Saban's creative practice and her many innovative collaborations with renowned Los Angeles print shops, including Gemini G.E.L, Mixografia, and Nopal Press. You'll hear more from and about the incredible master printmakers, press directors, and founders, but for now, I'll introduce Analia. Born in Argentina and based in Los Angeles, Analia Saban works across mediums, exploring how art objects are constructed and understood. Her work is deeply engaged with the tools of art making. While she regularly uses traditional materials, she subverts and often combines them with digital technologies to completely rethink how an artwork functions. Saban's work is in collections as close as that of the Hammer Museum, LACMA, the Getty Research Institute, and MoCA, to as far-reaching as MoMA, the National Gallery in Washington, D.C., the Centre Pompidou, Malba in Buenos Aires, the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, the National Gallery of Victoria in Melbourne, among many others. Now please join me in welcoming Naoko Takahatake, Analia Saban, Case Hudson, master printmaker at Gemini G.E.L, Shaye Remba, director of Mixografia, and Francesco Siqueiros, founder of Nopal Press.
Good evening. Thank you, Shannon, for the introduction, and thank you all for being here with us this evening. So many friendly faces, and we're just so delighted. Since its first maturity in the Renaissance, the making of prints in the Western tradition has involved the combined skills of a designer, printmaker, and printer. While the role of the artist is widely acknowledged, that of the printer over the centuries has often escaped attention. And yet, it is the hand of the printer that can be essential to understanding how a print was created. Crucially, the print shop is the locus of collaboration, and it is the creative partnership between artist and printer that is the subject of our panel this evening. It's always a pleasure to be in conversation with Analia Saban, and I'm delighted that we are joined by three of Analia's printmaking collaborators, Francesco Siqueiros of Nopal, Case Hudson of Gemini G.E.L, and Shaye Remba of Mixografia. Just to give you an overview of our program, I will start by turning the floor over to Analia, who will tell us about her creative practice and the important place of printmaking within it. And then I'll speak to each printmaker in turn, and then we'll open up the dialogue. Yes, I'm looking forward to a very stimulating conversation. So I'm just going to say a few words about Analia's work. Analia's creative practice begins with a series of fundamental generative questions about the purpose and significance of art. She interrogates the nature and meaning of materials and processes, exploring and challenging conventional assumptions about the formal properties and values attached to a given medium. Her approach is at once rigorously research-based and inventive, forensic and playful. Her work bridges and subverts material functions, proposing new dialogues between printmaking, painting, photography, sculpture, and weaving. Saban conceptually and physically deconstructs and reconfigures familiar materials and forms. Here we go, here's an example. Weaving dried acrylic paint strips into the warp and weft of linen canvas, draping slabs of concrete and marble over wooden sawhorses, sculpting the form of plastic bags with paper pulp, or digitally printing an image of an unraveling canvas onto a paper-thin sheet of paint, which is what you see here in a print edition made at Lapis Press here in Los Angeles. Keenly interested in old and new technologies, Saban has remarked how the discovery of a tool or machine might generate a project, and we'll hear more about that this evening. In printmaking, Analia probes the possibilities of its materials, tools, operations, and underlying logic. Works such as Flowchart, which maps the technical steps of making an etching, and this one, which visually explores the concept of editioning, take the procedures of printmaking as their subject. In Los Angeles, she has collaborated with Edition Jacob Samuel, Nopal, Gemini G.E.L, Mixografia, Lapis Press, and Adler. These experimental partnerships push the technical and conceptual limits of the medium, often prompting the invention of new artistic methods and raising the fundamental question, what is a print? Analia.
Thank you, Naoko. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm back at home. This is my home. I'm a product of UCLA. I graduated in 2005. I've been to so many lectures here. I've never been on this side of it, so I'm extremely nervous because it's hard to come home and be in front of your home, your peers. But I learned so much, and now I learned so much from you. I feel like I have an art historian, friend, mentor, and every time it's incredible just to be your friend. And thank you, Shaye, Case, and Francesco for joining me. We have so many slides to go through, so please, stay with us. They're all in this clicker. And I want to say we can't really start the conversation about printmaking in LA without honoring a very special friend who's Sidney Felsen. He's co-founder of Gemini G.E.L, and I mean, what can we say? I feel like you see it in the picture. He's, it's very recent, so I don't want to get emotional because we have 400 slides after this one, and I only have 10 minutes, and I could spend way more talking about Sydney, but I know a lot of people here have been touched by Gemini, and Francesco worked at Gemini in '84 working on a Liechtenstein project. Jacob Samuel worked at Gemini. It's really, this amazing history of friendship, playfulness. As you can see, this is with my baby, our baby, Ava. So sorry, let's move on. But Sydney's with us, and I just really want to acknowledge his spirit. We have to summarize 20 years of practice in 10 minutes, so I'm going to now really wake up. And this is called the painting ball. So as I said, I came here to school, and basically I was coming from a film and television background. And when I came to UCLA, I have to say, and my painting friends will probably disagree with me, but I felt they were getting all the attention and we weren't. So I was like, what's up with painting? I never had like thought so much about painting before. I just kind of would go to a museum and see paintings. I come from Argentina. I was a product of 1980s. After I grew up after a dictatorship, which is something to think about these days, because all the arts were gone when I was growing up. So the only museum left was like completely out of budget. I hope that doesn't resonate. But growing up, there was just no art really for me to look at. And only when I came to the US and I went to MoMA for the first time, I saw a lot of art. And then when I was at UCLA, I was like, what's up with painting? So I thought about painting a lot, and this was my reaction to it. I was like, I need to open up a painting to see what's in it. So I started opening it up, and it wasn't about destroying painting, but it was about like just looking at what's inside the painting, almost like looking at the microphone, at the microscope, and trying to understand the substance of it. So this is all the little pigments attached to it. I see oil, I see acrylic paint, I see tempera, I see canvas, fabric, similar to the fabric we wear. So I think this is kind of like the foundation to my work. I was trying to understand how a painting is made. So like I see brush strokes, they move the hand from A to B. So it's like a vector system. And I was trying to I'm like, what are the forces inside the painting? I chose a lot of work. It was really hard to choose works because we have so many works, but I chose works that have to deal with the language of printmaking and reproduction. So this is a painting that's reproduced in China. So they have these factories that reproduce classic paintings. And in this case, you can see how you have two reproductions of the same painting, but then if you look at them closely, you see all the differences. So it was kind of this capitalist gesture of okay, let's send it back to China. So they make it perfect. But of course, they are still amazing. They have a tree person and a background person, and they are made kind of as a chain. So it's similar to printmaking, but people do it instead of a press. I was thinking a lot also about reproduction and the language within art. So this is taking a line from Kandinsky and then taking almost abstracting the language of it. So cutting the line in different sizes and then using those lines again, reusing them in these compositions. That the idea is to use a ready-made language, a ready-made vocabulary of lines. I was thinking a lot about what makes a painting, so brush strokes. If I use acrylic paint, can they stand on their own? Can I attach them in different ways? And here is where I want to make some connections with some of the projects we'll see later, which are, for instance, in this case, one of the first Gemini pieces I made. I'm like, is painting kind of like a container for paint? So can it exist inside the bag as opposed to, I'm like, how is the paint held on to the wall? And why is it hanging on the wall? If it's like a body in a way, like a square with this canvas attached to it, why is it even on the wall? Could it be out of the same materials, but does the paint, I was just trying to really understand the different elements in them. And then these are bags of paint with the same materials. There is a stretcher bar inside. And then you see the paint coming out. And then this is another Gemini edition called Press Paint, where we were running the piece through the press, and then the paint was oozing out. I'm totally out of air because it's so much material. I think a lot about transcendence, and in a way, it's almost like the soul. We don't know what happens to it, but I love the idea of like something going into something and then transforming into something else. This is one of my favorite pieces where like the line goes into the canvas and then it like exists outside of the canvas. Maybe it becomes something else. And then this is a piece we work with Francesco about like the ink coming into this tree, making the outline of it, and then continuing. This is from a photograph where like I'm taking the emulsion from the photograph and then painting with the emulsion. So in a way, like that line, instead of being a pigment, it's actually I'm painting with the photograph, which I think it's important as an idea because art materials can be anything. And this is my portrait on the left. So you can see how my face became abstracted into this line. And then a piece that we worked with Francesco at the Nopal Press. This is similar idea, but made with wax. So the idea of like, again, the paint as a container. And here I was starting to think, okay, so if we're doing acrylic paint, like why do we have to even like paint on canvas? Acrylic paint is basically a polymer, it's a plastic. So I'm like, well, maybe it can exist on its own. So then we started making these pieces, which were made out of acrylic paint only. So this is a towel that's just draping on the canvas. So at the end of the day, it's acrylic on canvas, but it's totally different the way it's made. And then this brings me to the first edition that we work with Mixografia, which is a towel that's made out of paper. Again, more paint objects. This brings me to the first, one of the early editions at Gemini, where we made this paint ink vase, and then we let it dry just a little bit, but then inside the vase it was still, so the ink made like a skin, and then inside the vase the still was wet, so then we ran it through the press, and then the ink kind of came out because of the inside of the actual body of ink. More of my paint objects. One of them was in a home in Paris, and like somebody actually broke into the home and like looking for paintings to steal, and they actually broke the bag to see if there was something inside. But I was actually happy about it. This is a piece that actually I showed here at the Hammer Museum for the first Made in LA, which was not as popular as Made in LA these days, but still an amazing show. And same thing. At some point we were installing the show and people were like, why is this bag here on the floor? And they wanted to like pick it up and take it away. But I love working on these bags. And then we did a Mixografia edition about plastic bags, also because plastic bags, are always very, political. I mean, they kind of go away, they come back. These are other paper projects that we do in the studio. So like we do a lot of like painting and ink-based projects in the studio. In this case, we're carving a piece of paper, very thin piece of paper with a laser machine. So you can see like how it's almost about to collapse, but it's still there. And then we put like a paper underneath. So everything that gets burned on the first layer gets imprinted on the second layer. And then we try to produce like different ways of printing. This is applied to a painting. So carving, I was like, can a painting be carved as if I was carving a piece of marble? And we carved it with a laser cutter. So it's and then it's like it starts with a fully painted canvas, and then in the machine it gets carved. And this is beautiful Gemini edition that we worked with Case. Another beautiful Gemini edition that I love working on because those lines were kind of really fun to make with a Dremel. We'll see a picture later. And then other works, more sculptural from the studio, related to marble. I was thinking like, can a piece of marble, so approaching the same, the same way to be like, okay, what's a sculpture? What's a piece of marble? What's the history of drape sculpture? Can I now do my own drapery in terms of marble? So I tried. And then we work with breaking some vases at Gemini. Again, a super fun project. They have a very strong press that like goes boom. How many tons? We crashed these vases. And I wanted to include these pieces because even though we're folding a piece of concrete, I'm embracing the language of paper folding. So accordion fold, these are for brochures and paper pieces, gate fold and spiral fold. And then more recently, I've been thinking of, what's another relationship between canvas and paint? So I've been weaving the paint through the canvas at the same time, so making the paint and the canvas together. And these are some of the more recent Gemini editions. And I think we're coming to the end. This is called Flowchart. I've been drawing for the first time and thinking a lot about AI and computer technology and what it means for the creative process. So that's a close-up of Flowchart. And then that's the process of making a print that Case helped me figure out, because moving into AI and almost like giving like the keys to our creative process to a computer, first we have to define what the creative process is. So I've been thinking a lot about that. Sometimes happy, sometimes upset. I don't know yet. And because this is such a, like the spirit of collaboration is so present in printmaking, I don't think, maybe Francesco, you're more like a one-man operation mostly, but it really is such a demanding process, and everything is about collaboration and learning and sharing materials and experiences and techniques. So I want to acknowledge the way we work in my studio. So this is my studio. For many years, different periods, different assistants, everyone brought something to the table. And I thought it would be a nice parallelism before we move on to Francesco.
Thank you, Analia. That was remarkable. And I'm looking forward to speaking in a little more detail about some of these projects, some of these collaborations, and the ways in which your work works across mediums. So I will start by introducing you, Francesco. Francesco Siqueiros is an artist, printmaker, and publisher, born in Los Angeles and raised in Mexicali. He earned a BA in psychology from UC Berkeley and a diplôme d'art plastique from the University of Paris 1 Sorbonne. After a period of painting in New York, he returned to California to study printmaking at UC Santa Cruz, later working as a printer at Gemini G.E.L, as Analia mentioned, and at Cirrus Editions. His creative practice and social participatory awareness have been shaped by his encounters with the political graphics of the Chicano movement, Argentinian exile artists in Paris, and the 1980s New York art scene. A formative 1987 trip to Mexico City deepened his engagement with cross-border artistic dialogues and ultimately led to the Aquí y Allá exhibition in 1990, which featured artists from Mexico City and from the diaspora of the Chicano art experience in Los Angeles. This work inspired the founding of Nopal Press, dedicated to fostering international conversations on Chicano and Mexican art. Siqueiros views Nopal Press as an ongoing artistic and cultural project rooted in collaboration and community. Nopal has published some 500 projects by close to 100 artists, including Irena Cervantes, Ruben Ortiz Torres, Barbara Carrasco, Anita Bun, Fabian Cerejito, John Baldessari, Roberto Gil de Montes, Harry Gamboa, among many others. And El Nopal editions have been collected by museums worldwide. Thank you for being here, Francesco. I'm going to start by asking you to talk about how you see the role of the printer, how you would describe the role of the printer.
Yeah, thank you, Naoko, for the introduction. And can everybody hear me out there? And it's a pleasure to be here next to Case, Shaye, and talking about the graphics of Analia Saban. It's a good question. The function of the role of the printer, and I often think that the printer is really the medium, or rather, the print shop is the medium in which the architecture of the place, the setting of the print shop, the odor of the chemicals, the conversations that go into the place, as depending on the time that the artist is there, the paper, and the possibilities that are possible there, they contribute to the finished work, the print or the multiple of the print shop. And I find it that that medium, if we call it a medium, it is almost like if it was a charcoal or a paint itself, in which things get transformed in there. But it is a collective endeavor in terms of the history of the place, the physicality, and the atmosphere.
Thank you, and I think we'll hear echoes of this throughout the conversation. I want to ask you, you have worked, as I mentioned, with over 100 artists. And I'm hoping you can say a few words about what marks your collaboration or your relationship with Analia as distinct or unique.
Well, your introduction really covered really some of the main aspects of the meeting Analia, and she introducing this very unique way of dealing with the stencils. And in working with 100 artists, close to 100 artists for 35 years, and as you said in the introduction, the driving force of El Nopal Press was to create a presence of the very dynamic Chicano art dynamic. And Analia, with her very keen observations of materials, I think she brings about a certain sense of dialectic in terms of breaking down the relationship of the relationship of objects, and now that psychoanalysis, it was a big interest in her life. Things make a little bit more sense as I look back at some of these projects that started right after, maybe a few years after she graduated from UCLA. And the stencil work was a really big eye opener and a contribution to furthering this conversation that I've had with El Nopal Press, sort of to broaden its conversation into a larger global audience.
Let's talk about the stencil. So the stencil is, in a way, a very early form of printmaking. The stencil acts as the matrix. But as you will see, and the selection of works that I would like to hear the two of you talk about are really around the use of the stencil. Analia has made prints at El Nopal that are not around the use of this kind of matrix, but this is a focused selection. And what I think is really exciting in looking at these is the aspect of having a fixed matrix, but then the work at the end embracing breakage and potential failure and chance in each iteration that you're printing. So I can move these slides forward if you want. So these are, and
Well, this was actually an addition, and I don't think this is the very first. I think that on the, number one, I think that the stencil experimentation, maybe this was the first time that it was done, but it was actually conceived as an addition, though. So there's 20 of each of these ones, and that was never done. And then we moved on to larger sizes and more maybe experimental, playing with the pressure, as you can see right here.
Analia, do you want to comment on these?
Yeah, so, okay, same thing. I didn't understand painting. I don't fully understand sculpture or art. I don't really understand why we're here talking about it, but, let's go with it. So, printmaking, I'm like, why does an image deserves to exist 100 times and the other image doesn't? Like, why does a unique work is unique? And then this image, you're like, okay, you're going to become an edition and like 100 people will have access to the same image. I still don't understand it. So while I was working with Francesco, as you can see, I didn't get there. We never made an edition. Every print was a mono print, right? That's how you call it. But I did love to play with the press. I mean, he has this amazing press, and you just like, and he was very open to making a big mess because, now the ink is dry and beautiful, but while we were working on it, it was like...
It was sometimes catastrophe that meant good.
And by the way, so many pieces like didn't make it.
Like this one right here. This is the newspaper clippings came in 2011, I think, no? And actually, this particular series, which actually started with with the New York Times, and eventually it became a roster of global newspapers, and they actually were exhibited in Buenos Aires for the first time. And I think it was like actually two parts. We finished like a whole series of these newspaper clippings, and then there was a second part finished in Los Angeles.
So something that's really interesting about printmaking, and Naoko actually introduced me to this incredible art historian, Jennifer Roberts, that, if you're interested in very good printmaking, writings about printmaking, I recommend her book. It's called Contact. And something that's really interesting about printmaking is that it's a blind process. So you have to like put the plate and the paper, and you put the blanket on top, and then you either turn the wheel or press a button. Gemini has both. You have the button type, right?
Yeah.
and then it comes out the other side, and it's always a surprise. So this particular process, because we were, what was the process? We put like a layer of paper.
Well, in all of them, even from the beginning, these ones are much larger, but there is a support paper, like a good paper, support paper. I mean, good paper in printmaking is archival paper, and then there is this, and then Analia would apply ink, maybe super calculated or whatever. She was applying the ink, and then we dropped the stencil on top, and then it was covered with another protective sheet, the cover sheet, and then it was run through the press, at different levels of pressure to create different reactions on the result at the end.
So in some cases, the paper will break. In some other cases, it will stay the same. And then this was one project you wanted to mention.
Well, I mean, I was just, again, I was just thinking the possibilities of your work as the idea again, the ideas of psychological dynamics. The one on the right is the one with the stencil. You can see that with the stencil. And the cover sheet that was the protective sheet that I talked about uh, actually copied the image was copied entirely on the cover sheet, and then it was transferred to another um, good paper. So in a way, it acts as a uh, as a conversation of the dynamic of a hidden truth or some subtleties that goes in the information towards something else. And you can actually ask, which one is the original in the sense that, there are some hidden things in one or the other that informs the whole project.
And it's the idea of the offset, and reversal, of course, is such an important aspect in the logic of printmaking. I'm going to move on now to Gemini, Gemini G.E.L. The renowned artist workshop and publisher of limited edition prints and sculpture was founded here in Los Angeles in 1966 by Sidney Felsen, Stanley Grinstein, and master printer Ken Tyler, together with Rosamund Felsen and Elise Grinstein. From its inception, Gemini has championed technical experimentation, providing artists with the means to produce groundbreaking work. Within its first 5 years, Gemini collaborated with artists such as Robert Rauschenberg, Klaus Oldenburg, Ellsworth Kelly, Jasper Johns, and Roy Lichtenstein, and established a reputation for bold collaborative experimentation. And this experimental ethos continues to this day. Recent collaborators include Julie Meritu, Tacita Dean, Toba Kadori, and of course, Analia Saban. Gemini has worked with 70 artists and engaged over 155 printers, publishing nearly 2,700 editions. They have specialized shops for intaglio, lithography, and screen printing, with a lot of crossover between them, and until recently maintained a dedicated space for Richard Serra, with whom they produced over 330 editions across 52 years. At Gemini, Case Hudson is a master printer and manager of the intaglio shop. Since joining Gemini in 2006, he has collaborated with 12 artists, including Bruce Nauman, Tacita Dean, Jasper Johns, Richard Tuttle, Julie Meritu, and Toba Kadori, and of course, Analia. From 1997 to 2004, he was a master printer at Crown Point Press, the San Francisco publisher of fine art etching, where he worked with some 25 artists. He completed the printer training program at the Tamarind Institute in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and earned his MFA in printmaking from the Rhode Island School of Design. Hi, Case. I'm going to start by asking you the same question. How do you describe the role of the printer?
I would describe it the same way I have in the past, which is really making a space for any artist who comes through the door to feel free to make whatever they want. And I sort of take my experience that I've had to create that space. So it's mental space, it's physical space. But coming in and working at different shops at Crown Point and Gemini, I would also say that Sidney Felsen and Stanley Grinstein created an incredible space for printers also to come in and have the space to create that space for artists. So there's a chain that goes down and also a history that goes back. And that's basically how I would describe it.
And so in terms of making space for Analia to come in and make something new, can you talk a little bit about what has marked her collaboration at Gemini as distinct. And I think you have a rough count of how many projects you worked on together.
Roughly 50 projects with Analia, which might be the record of the 12 or 13 artists I've worked with at Gemini. So Analia is very ambitious, which is very satisfying to have an artist come in and just want to go and make lots and lots of work. It's great. Some artists come in and very timid and not quite sure what they want to do, and it's what got me into printmaking is the process. And so that was satisfying to have an artist like Analia come in who's very interested in the process, and that's even how she started. There's a moment at Gemini, it's the building that the etching department is in is a Frank Gehry building, which has a stairwell that goes up, and there's a big glass window that looks into the shop. So constantly throughout the day, there's people walking by. Some people stop and watch us. And as printers, we're very excited about these moments that happen, all these, very repetitive, but it stays very exciting moments where you see separate layers of an artist's work happening and fresh, sparkling, wet ink coming off. And a person will be coming in and they'll watch for a moment, and we're getting excited because someone's watching and they're going to see this thing come off the press, and we'll just be just about to pull it off the press, and they'll walk on and walk away. And okay, well, they missed it, but they watch the slow, it's a slow process, so they get a little bored. But what was really satisfying is when Analia first showed up, all she wanted to do was just watch us work. She watched us work for, 2 or 3 days. She came in and she just said, just keep working, just go about your business. And she was looking at the materials where we were using, the equipment, the way we were physically moving, all these things. And it was kind of a satisfying way of building a relationship with an artist that was very different than someone coming in and just being like, okay, what do I do? And start from there, which happens, and it's fine. But it was a nice way of building a relationship with an artist. And now I'm looking at the photos too, and should I be referring to the photos too?
Would you like me to go back?
Yes. Just in terms of using tools, Analia is very involved too, where some artists might be standing back and just doing a drawing, and then we'll take that and get that onto the plate and then bring that back and forth. It's nice to have somebody just jump into it with us. So after those few days of observing, she really dove in and sort of joined the team in working, which was a nice way of working too. Okay, and this one.
Analia, do you want to say a few words about this?
And this is, I think, my first Gemini project, and I just want to very quickly share, what does it feel like to work at Gemini for the first time? So, it's so intimidating. I mean, beyond, right? Like you go in and, Sydney has this incredible wall that you saw in the first picture of all the artists that, have come before you, and he has photographed them all. He's Naoko made this incredible exhibition at the Getty on his photos. And so you go in and, all the people, all the artists that you love and you admire, they have all gone through Gemini. And then he welcomes you in this room, which we saw in the picture. It's called the Artist Studio, and it's an empty room. And he's like, okay, go, I'm like, okay, so the one thing about Sydney that he gave me, and that's probably the biggest gift an artist could get, full certainty. He was like, it's going to happen. It might take 2-3 weeks, but it will happen. And I didn't have that certainty myself, so I have to say, as I said, I wouldn't be here tonight without his support. Fingerprint, was out of seeing the printer's work and the wiping of the plate and the pristine. So you have like such a messy process. I mean, like if you go to Gemini, I don't know, wear black. I mean, that's my recommendation, or wear the color that they're working with. Try to match Julie Mehretu because that's like so many colors. But, you know, like it's such an interesting process. You're working with this viscosity, the material, it's ink, it's oil-based, it gets on everything, and yet they're working on this like super pristine paper. And I just love that relationship between like just the handling, and I think that's what Case referred to. Like I just kept looking at the printers, how they work. I mean, it's basically a choreography. I mean, and I know if one is missing, like it's really a problem for you guys because it's really like they need each other, and just the way the paper is handled, the way the plates are handled. So fingerprint is a testament to that. And as an Argentinian, we have only a few things to be proud of, like, you know, Messi and all this, like just really, like I can count them with one hand, but we came up with the ID, like the fingerprint as an ID. And that's like the one thing you grow up knowing about your country. But I really love that moment of like messing up that pristine space. And it's just, yeah, I love that that's the first Gemini print, the little gesture.
And I also think that as we go through the couple of projects, the great diversity of projects that came out of a very short, intense proofing session, which is the time where the artist is working directly with the printers to develop ideas, but that you really, you know, we talked about the stencil as one form of matrix, but the fingerprint being this kind of original matrix that we all carry with us. And so the ways in which we can find ways to push the language and logic of printmaking forward. So speaking of prints that are not prints, but that are kind of somewhere between the world of the print, the sculpture, and the multiple, I think this is a wonderful example of that. And again, here I'll have Case and Analia talk about it, but you know, so much of the work that happens in the shop is around the press and the pressure of the press. And I think that Analia has really found ways at Gemini to kind of explore that. The way you've heard her explore kind of in painting, what is a painting, what is sculpture, well, what is a print?
I'd also just want to back up and comment on the fingerprint one also, because from the printer's angle, this idea of having a fingerprint in the border is like this is what you're constantly trying to avoid, or touching the plate, what you're trying to avoid. And Analia's having the printer stick their finger in that plate and then stick it into the border. So physically doing that. So throughout the edition, that's what the printer was doing. What we're like always trying not to do. And so I just wanted to point that out, and that which is a great part of that print. This I wanted to show, which was, you know, really grew out of Analia's observation of just the equipment, the way the press worked, the roller on the press, the way the blankets went through the press, the sort of high pressure and sort of squishing quality of the ink getting pressed into the paper. This is a good example where we started, where we just took some of the cleaning rags that we had, and because she was looking at all the materials we had, and we just took a cleaning rag, and I think Amy, the printer, stitched some together, and Analia wanted to see how the ink would squish through that cloth. So this is that little short video. You can see the ink squishing through the cloth of these rags. And then Analia brought in new materials with the linen, which got used in many different projects. These are some other small tests. You can see on the left is the rag test, and then bringing in the linen that we were squishing ink through. And the amount of ink was building and building, and I was saying that, well, at this level where you see it, if that were ink, it might take 20 years to dry for an oil. So we switched to acrylic paint for these, and ended up for the edition stitching bags of linen, pouring in, I don't know, a gallon or I don't know, half gallon to a gallon of acrylic paint into these bags and then running them through the press. And so trying it in different ways, from that first test of squishing it through the bags to then squishing it out into the open end is what you see in that last photo. And that became the final piece. One thing I'd like to point out, because it was sort of came out of the process, and I wasn't even sure why it was happening at first, but can you go back to the bags? There. So that where you, in the color where you can see the texture of the linen coming through, I wasn't sure why that was happening. And it turned out it was as we were putting the paint in the bag, it took a little bit of time. And in just that short amount of time, the paint would start to dry. And so where it dried on the bag, it wouldn't come through the linen. And where it was still wet and fresh, it would soak right through. So it was interesting to see that just sort of as a result of the process, and that became part of the edition.
I'm going to move us to the next project in the interest of time. So if you want to talk about this.
This brushstroke matrix, there were a series, I think 6 different matrix that Analia made out of acrylic medium heavy brushstroke, which you saw some reference to that she made earlier from other pieces that she put onto paper. So she just put these brushstrokes with a brush, heavy, as you can see, 3D pieces that we dried onto paper. Then we ran those through the press, and then on the right you can see where it was embossed into the paper that we ended up using. And in that embossment, she wanted the ink or the paint that we were using to go into those and to kind of display those embossments. At first, we were using a squeegee for silk screen, which has a rubber squeegee on it. And it was a little bit too soft, so it was sinking into those embossments and scooping out too much ink. So I made this squeegee out of copper, which was very stiff and was able to just drag across the surface. And here's a little video you can see of how we were doing that. So that the paper that you see that we're about to squeegee on has already been embossed. It's wet paint. And then as we pull across, you'll see the embossed brush strokes kind of appear. And this is a moment too where I was saying, like I was saying earlier, where we get to see these moments in the artwork that nobody else gets to see, where it's still glistening and just kind of a beautiful birth of a new artwork.
And again, here we see Analia playing with the logic of the print, the tools, the materials, but also the printer playing with that. So, the copper that's used, that's usually the copper that's used for the matrix, but here it's becoming a tool for the actual printing or the spreading of the ink, so subverting these relationships. I'm going to now introduce our third printer, Shaye Remba, the director of Mixografia, the innovative print studio founded by his parents, Luis and Leia Remba. In the early 1970s, Luis established Taller de Gráfica Mexicana in Mexico City, a fine art lithography studio that invited artists to experiment and collaborate. A pivotal 1973 partnership with Rufino Tamayo led to the invention of the Mixografia technique, a unique process that adds texture and dimensionality to prints. To support this innovation, Shaye, a trained mechanical engineer, designed custom paper-making equipment and later developed a large format press. Following a successful UCLA exhibition and the encouragement of then Fine Arts Dean Robert Gray, the Rembas opened a Mixografia studio here in Los Angeles in 1983. Shaye joined in 1986, bringing with him a degree in mechanical engineering from the Universidad Autónoma Metropolitana and training in photography from La Casa del Lago, both in Mexico City. Blending technical skill with creative insight, Shaye has collaborated closely with artists such as John Baldessari, Helen Frankenthaler, Jacob Hashimoto, Alex Israel, Jason Martin, Ed Ruche, Allison Saar, Rufino Tamayo, and Jonas Wood, among others, building lasting partnerships through the studio's innovative approach. Under his leadership, Mixografia technique has continued to evolve, producing increasingly complex works that have redefined the boundaries of printmaking. To date, Mixografia has published over 600 unique editions by 89 artists. Thanks for being here, Shaye.
Thank you.
So I will start again with the same question. How do you describe the role of the printer?
Well, I will add a few more things, but basically printmaking is consists of making multiple impression of the same concept. Now, what we do is a little bit more complicated because it involves texture, relief, the use of materials, which this is what I think is the quality that distinguishes Mixografia from the traditional printmaking techniques. Because of this, our process is not a very agile process, so it becomes very difficult to really work with the artist. So mainly our collaborations and the close engagement we have with the artist really exists at a very conceptual level, and then based on those ideas and of course the work of the artist providing us some matrices and materials, we create our special three-dimensional prints. And so because of that, it is would be very difficult to do like the monoprints. We need to make our own paper, and it's a very slow process. But on the other hand, we can create relief on a surface of handmade paper, and that's what has enabled us to have these close collaborations with many artists. And it has been a pleasure to collaborate with Analia, and I think we have produced really interesting prints, and this was our first collaboration, and yeah, it came about from your acrylic towel. But here, the idea, she wanted to add a little stain, to bring it closer to your body, you mentioned. And, even originally, what shall we use? The original idea was tea, but tea fades. So we because as printmakers, we are evolving our techniques all the time. So we came about with, ended up being a simple acrylic, diluted acrylic paint. And Analia, in each artwork, stained the white piece of handmade paper. And after that print, she found this towel, and the really interesting aspect of the towel was the label, the global, now not so, they want to kill that, global trade, Egyptian cotton made in Pakistan, sold in Target, So, but in this case, technically for us, and we had to work directly with the towel, And this became a stepstone to do the next project. And not the next project, but the third project, which was the labels. But also during this time, we tackled the bag, paper or plastic. So this was happening when they were banning the bags in LA. So part of what, we were commenting about how we needed to make the plastic bag immortal and place them in a museum. So that was kind of part of the dialogue we had during the project. I think the language of what the bags or what they signify, I think the deeper thoughts probably came afterwards. But we were working, trying to replicate this very fragile material in a way. It cannot preserve its shapes. It just does what the winds want the plastic to do. And technically, what became very difficult was how to the images, how to create the images on these very complicated, wrinkled surfaces, because that logo is really the message of the bag. Sometimes optimistic commerce, but everything at the end is one use. Now, the prints we make are three-dimensional. This is the back of one of the bags. So you can see how deep and how also all these wrinkles exist in the back of the bag, because we are deforming the paper to create these volumes that represent materials that I think in the case of Analia, your work is about materials, how to repurpose them, transform them, or find another use. So this is the front of one of the bags, of course, multi-language, very global, and this is part of the we are missing two bags, but this is the way the whole concept looks on a wall. Now, the way we work, we talk about how we need to conceptualize things, how the dialogue starts. This project started with clothing labels, something as ephemeral as that. How many times do we observe them? 1 or 2 times during the life of the garment. So Analia wanted to really make an emphasis of that, and how there is a language that transcends what it really is as an object. So the first thing was to select the labels, and you see the sizes. There is a ruler just to give a sense of scale. And this is a close-up of one of the labels that we select to make the chronology of this project. Of course, and then we made a model that is an enlarged model that represents the label, and this is what Analia manipulated in the shop to give it its final shape. This is Analia working on another label, but we had to develop this whole system of how to create wrinkles, shapes, and freeze them in time, so we could produce a printing plate, which is this. And this is the inverse of what you just saw. And on this plate, the master printers work to create the magic and make this piece of paper believable and transmit the concept that Analia wanted to transmit, to the public. So this is video of how it happens. This is our facility in downtown LA, and it's a 1.5 minute video of how what happens with the plate during a day of work, basically. You see all the colors, different techniques, the ink, the handmade paper that we use, how it's formed on the plate. You know, that's because of that we can shape it. It supports the image, the details, you know, different ways of extracting water. That's paper making. The press, like an etching press. And voila. So that's the print, and it takes 1 day to do that. But you see, you can appreciate the qualities of the surface, you know, you can see count the threads if you wish. And that's the print, and then the concept.
Should I keep going?
Yeah,
Okay.
the last one is that's the print, and that's the next one is the last one. Well, signature, of course. And that's the whole project. So we collaborate. Of course, the most important thing is to bring, you know, to make possible what the artist conceives. That's what we do.
Thank you, Shaye. I'm going to give this to Analia. So Analia is going to take us on a tour of all of her editions made here in Los Angeles. We're just going to run this in the background because there is a large number of them, but I think it will give you a great sense of the variety. And while she does this, we'll continue the conversation. And what I want to just start as she does this, because these are all of her Los Angeles printmaking collaborations, is just to acknowledge the print culture that we have here in Los Angeles. It is an incredibly creative and innovative and welcoming community with a really rich history. What I think has come through in the conversation is the way in which each shop develops its own techniques, its own processes, and as Kay said, to create a space where an artist can come in and create something new and different, maybe something that they might not be able to do in their own studios. I think what's really remarkable about Analia's work is that she really engages with the specificity of what is possible within that shop. So not just trying to make prints for the sake of making prints, but thinking really thoughtfully and inventively about how she can take what is already being done in that shop and move that forward. So with that, I would love to hear your thoughts, including yours, Analia, about Los Angeles. I know that in the room we have variety of representatives of the print community from other printers, and I'm sorry I can't see everyone from where I'm sitting right now, but printers, we have our paper experts here, Hiromi and Yuki from Hiromi Paper, so suppliers of materials who printers and artists work closely with. We have a number of curators and others from the art trades, so it's really wonderful that we're all here to advance the graphic cause and to celebrate the work of Analia. So I'd love to hear from you if you have thoughts on the place of Los Angeles, what you feel what Los Angeles has offered you in particular.
Well, for one thing, I'd like to acknowledge I'm sorry, were you?
Oh, no, I wanted to remind you of the microphone.
Oh. Well, I wanted to acknowledge some of recognize the culture of printmaking in Los Angeles and the departure of some of the great contributors to this. Recently, the passing of Jean Milland and
Of Cirrus editions.
and from Gemini, Sidney Redner, Sidney Felsen, and Stanley Greenstein, and and uh, and really congratulate all of the printers of Los Angeles that are keeping Los Angeles a very viable place for printmaking.
Thank you. That was wonderful. And do you have further thoughts to add to that?
Well, you mentioned Hiromi paper, which I started in San Francisco at Crown Point Press, which I would be just on the phone with Hiromi and ordering paper from her, and to then be at Gemini and continuing that, and now being able to go there. I don't know, it's all over the country. The import of Japanese papers, it seems to start at Hiromi paper and go out. Sometimes you'll even see an edition that'll say on Hiromi paper, and it'll just sort of be the term for the Japanese paper because of that. But I really appreciate Hiromi paper being in Los Angeles as one thing, but of course the artist scene that goes way, way back, and the patron of artists, Stanley Grinstein, having his both support but also space and access for artists to both make work and play. When I started at Gemini, my dad is an artist, and he said, "Oh, I know Gemini. I went to a great party at one of the owners' houses. It was at Stanley Grin's house." I go, "Okay, yes." And so over the years, I hear of these parties more and more, and they sounded amazing. But it really feels like part of the culture of Los Angeles and the art scene in general.
And I think I just want to add to that the way in which these print shops have historically, from the founding of these shops with, almost 60 years ago with Gemini, over 50 years with Cirrus, and you've heard about the histories also of El Nopal, Mixografia, and there are others, that these are really, as I said, they're sites of collaborations, and they have been so important to bringing artists from outside of Los Angeles to come and work in our city and to really these shops have been really instrumental in terms of establishing Los Angeles as an art-making city on a national and international stage, and pushing forward the aesthetics of the Los Angeles art scene. So just wanted to add to that.
Yeah, well, I want to add, these, of course, we are the long-established shops, but I think the fact of the schools, the younger artists, younger generations of printers are all over the place. Probably, yeah, they don't have the big shops, but I think it's a very active community of younger printers that eventually they will be the ones carrying the flag in a way for Los Angeles.
Well, here we're part of UCLA, and Camilla Taylor, who teaches printmaking at UCLA, is here with us, and she brings her students to study prints in the collection that we have at the Grunwald Center. I think maybe some of your students are here as well. So it is that intergenerational quality to it. Of course, I think that's so important to think about the way in which printmaking creates access also for artists to make work.
And also you mentioned the intergenerational, or Gemini has been around since 1966. And yes, the sad passing of Sidney and Stanley, but the family continues, and the Grinstein and Felsen family still running Gemini. So it's ongoing too, in terms of intergenerational.
And there's also an intergenerational aspect to the artists who work at these different shops, of artists introducing new artists to your shops. I know for you, Francesco, that John Baldessari was one of your artists, and of course Analia was a student of John's. He was Analia's mentor, and that that transmission of knowledge and relationships, I think, is also important. That was the case also for Gemini.
Yeah, and as I said, the building of collaboration with the artists, and then John Baldessari was a very important collaboration at the time. Sort of start opening up the doors closer to a more to a profile that was more advancing on Nopal Press. And I also wanted to mention the self-help graphist in, Karen Bocalero, who also passed away some time ago. A great print shop that really elaborated many possibilities for Chicano artists.
And also creating a space that is more than just about art making, but about community building.
I just want to say I got a bit emotional in between because, I mean, it's a real community effort, and we're so lucky, to experience this. I'm so lucky to work with you and to share these techniques, and these are like really old techniques, and we're using them now in the age of technology and AI, and the challenge is, what are we going to do with these techniques in this time? And I think we are all evolving together, and we're all thinking about, what are the next steps? And the interesting thing is that somehow they are becoming more valuable. Naoko and I went on the Hiromi paper tour, which was amazing. Thank you, Hiromi. We were and Yuki to lead the tour. We were in Japan for a week looking at all these, paper making workshops. And, just to think about the fibers that are inside the paper, where do they grow? How do they get translated into these sheets of paper that one person makes? And it was like a real lesson to appreciate the work. It looks easy until we tried it. And then
It's the same with printing. So we're here with a seminar that is part of this paper project initiative. And again, I just want to acknowledge the Getty for funding this seminar and for supporting this program this evening. The 12 participants who are early career, mid-career curators who have responsibility over print collections have convened here for a week in Los Angeles, and we spent the day at Gemini printing, making intaglio, or working on intaglio plates and printing them. And until you do it, they make it look so easy. Those people who just walk up the stairs, as Case was saying, and kind of like look and then they move on, until you have done it. And you've really got your hands dirty and you've really got frustrated with yourself. I think, it's hard to fully appreciate the time, the expertise, the labor, the care that goes into sustaining all of these projects.
Aren't in Japan you have the royal national treasures?
You have the
and these are
living
people,
national treasures.
Not chest of gold.
Exactly. So not just materials that are designated as national treasures, but you have living national treasures who are individuals who have skills and expertise.
So yeah, just to appreciate that, because even the way the ink is made and where it comes from, these are all natural, resources. And this is cotton paper, so different than the Japanese paper. But, just to take a moment to really appreciate, when you're, like you said now, when you're working with Case. I remember the first time I was like, sure, let's try that. And he's like, okay, sure, let's try it. So like he goes, you're in the artist studio, and he goes to the etching studio, and he like etches it on like a copper plate. And then you're like, oh wait, like this is not like Photoshop, like, just like kind of edit. And I was like, okay, I better be careful with some of these decisions because it's etched on a copper plate, and that took like a lot of effort and a lot of materials. And so anyway, to really like, take a moment to I think to like appreciate these techniques, and I'm so happy for these shops to keep that spirit alive, because, you know, as we move into like the age of AI and technology, I mean, this materials, we still have a body. I mean, that's why I think about this a lot. We still have a body. We still, like, our bodies, I think, connect with these materials in a very like ancestral way. Like, you know, we have a relationship. When you look at the piece of paper and you're looking about this fossil material like ink, or you're looking at synthetic ink, when you're looking at the fibers, we're looking at the gesture of the artist, when you're looking at, you know, how deep the line is, and that was caused by an acid that etched the plate. I mean, all these things make a print different than, let's say, a poster or an image on your phone. And I just, like, I got kind of emotional because it takes such an effort to make what you guys make. And then the artist complained because then we have to sign, like, you know, 20 prints, like, and you're like, oh man, I have to sign 20 prints. And we forgot that, like, you know, those, like, this little print, I mean, it's only one color, but it took, like, you know, the cutting of the, I mean, all those steps, good timing. That's what it took to make that one single color print. That's like, I mean, I choose sometimes like only one color etchings because I know what it takes and I feel kind of responsible for their time. When you look at a full color print or some of the projects, what are the other projects you make? Okay, sorry to put you on the spot, like Julie's work. Can you tell me how many layers?
Well, 5 layers, but up to 60 colors on those mixed, those 5 layers.
So 60 colors.
Yeah.
So this is 2 colors.
I'm just looking at the time, and I know that you've been such a wonderful audience, and I can feel the energy that you brought into this room with you. And I hope this has been an opportunity, even for those who are very knowledgeable about printmaking, to deepen your appreciation of the art of printmaking, of the graphic cause, to learn more about Analia's really remarkable creative practice, and just an opportunity for us to be together, which I'm really grateful for. So
I want to finish the slides
yes,
because I'm almost there.
So Analia is going to keep going with that, but I just really want to take this moment to thank you for being here with us, and for all that you, for all those who are related to the print world, for all that you have done to keep
Thank
this
you.
alive.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to go all the way to the end because we're so lucky to have Mixografia, Gemini, and El Nopal Press, but I also work with Lapis Press and Atlar Studios, which is the first augmented reality print. And I just want to like quickly get there. It's almost done. So this is inkjet actually on a layer of paint. I wanted to see if I could add add color to paint in a different way. So I added like an inkjet layer, and then on canvas. And this is the last project. So it's an image of a print that we made for this project. And then on your, if you look at it through the phone or an iPad, you see kind of how the print was made. So it adds like another layer. And we're going back to woodcut, so hopefully you see what's next. This is a Gemini project, but I think we have upcoming projects with everyone. Thank you so much.